In need of references for your research? Do you want a search engine that is easy to navigate? And do you want it free? If you are a student, researcher, or teacher looking for socioeconomic references and materials, then SERPI is for you. To access SERPI, just visit the PIDS website at www.pids.gov.ph and click the SERPI widget. Or type serp-p.pids.gov.ph. SERPI is an online database of socioeconomic studies and materials produced by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies and other academic and research institutions. SERPI has a wide variety of socioeconomic materials such as journal articles, books, working papers, policy notes, research papers, and newsletters. SERPI has 52 partner institutions that contribute publications to the database. SERPI has a wide coverage of materials encompassing 20 research themes. You can search by keyword or author, by publication type, by research theme, or year published. SERPI has more than 7,000 materials with full text that you can download for free. Enjoy searching! Visit SERPI now and follow us on Facebook. You may also send a message for inquiries.
Policies can either make or break a country and its people. Hence, they should be thoroughly studied and evaluated. This is where policy research comes in. Through Malacanang Proclamation 247 in 2002, the government declared the month of September as Development Policy Research Month, or DPRM. The DPRM aims to promote nationwide awareness on the importance of policy research in the formulation of evidence-based policies, plans, and programs. It also aims to cultivate a strong culture of research and research use among decision makers and raise the public's literacy on socioeconomic issues. The proclamation also designated the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, or PIDS, to oversee and coordinate all activities related to the DPRM. Various activities such as policy forums, press conferences, social media promotion, and the annual Public Policy Conference are organized by PIDS and its partners to celebrate the DPRM. Every year, the DPRM focuses on a particular theme, which is usually a current or an emerging development issue of national significance. For instance, the DPRM is centered on issues pertaining to regulations, risk reduction and management, decentralization, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the new globalization, and the reforms needed to address the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. This 2021, to follow through on last year's theme on innovating governance for the new normal, the DPRM is focusing on the theme Reset and Rebuild for a better Philippines in the post-pandemic world. Through this theme, we wish to emphasize that to rebuild from the COVID-19 pandemic and create a better Philippines, we need to reset our paradigms and practices by balancing the interests of people, profit, and planet. This means placing equal importance on economic, social, and environmental well-being and sustainability. To make this possible, the government should set the right policies that will allow all citizens, regardless of status in life, to access essential public services and will protect all segments of the population, especially the poor and the vulnerable, from various risks through effective social protection systems. The business sector, for its part, should explore ways and areas where it can be both profitable and socially responsible. Business owners and operators should embrace decent work principles, provide the best service to their customers, and care for the well-being of their employees, the community, and the environment. Meanwhile, the civil society should continue reaching out to sectors that do not have access to government channels. It should also strengthen its advocacy for more accountable and responsive governance and more sustainable business practices. The academe also has an important role to play. It should ensure that the new modes of delivering education and training under the new normal are accessible to all and will not widen economic and social inequalities. As individual citizens, we also need to start living more responsibly by adopting more sustainable lifestyles. We should start the reset and rebuild agenda with ourselves to effectively influence others. Collectively, we all need to work together. The government, business sector, academe, civil society, and the general public should join forces in pursuing a shared vision of an equitable, sustainable, and resilient post-pandemic Philippines. Know more about the DPRM and how you can participate by visiting its website.
Dapat po munang alamin or matukoy ang pangunahing problema ng bansa upang mapagtuunan ng pansin at mabigyan ng solusyon.
Walang problema sa pulisiya. Iayos lang ang pagpapatupad.
Bago patubas ang batas, pag-aralan muna gusto ng government.
We should have a specific goals, do research, and make a policy that is fair for everyone.
Mandato ng Philippine Institute for Development Studies o PIDS na gumawa ng mga pag-aaral at pananaliksik ng mga polisiya at programa ng pamahalaan at magbigay ng rekomendasyon sa mga mambabatas sa pagbabalangkas ng mga polisiyang makakatulong sa ating bansa. Sinusulong ng aming ahensya ang evidence-based policy making upang bigyan diin ang kahalagahan ng polisiya na batay sa datos at policy research na sumusuri sa tunay na kalagayan ng ating mga komunidad. Napakahalaga ng policy research, lalo na sa mga panahong dumadaan sa krisis ang ating bansa.
Kapag ang polisiya sinaliksik, wala stick!
Policies can either make or break a country and its people. Hence, they should be thoroughly studied and evaluated. This is where policy research comes in. Through Malacanang Proclamation 247 in 2002, the government declared the month of September as Development Policy Research Month or DPRM. The DPRM aims to promote nationwide awareness on the importance of policy research in the formulation of evidence-based policies, plans, and programs. It also aims to cultivate a strong culture of research and research use among decision makers and raise the public's literacy on socioeconomic issues. The proclamation also designated the Philippine Institute for Development Studies or PIDS to oversee and coordinate all activities related to the DPRM. Various activities such as policy forums, press conferences, social media promotion, and the annual Public Policy Conference are organized by PIDS and its partners to celebrate the DPRM. Every year, the DPRM focuses on a particular theme which is usually a current or an emerging development issue of national significance. For instance, the DPRM is centered on issues pertaining to regulations, risk reduction and management, decentralization, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the new globalization, and the reforms needed to address the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. This 2021, to follow through on last year's theme on innovating governance for the new normal, the DPRM is focusing on the theme Reset and Rebuild for a better Philippines in the post-pandemic world. Through this theme, we wish to emphasize that to rebuild from the COVID-19 pandemic and create a better Philippines, we need to reset our paradigms and practices by balancing the interests of people, profit, and planet. This means placing equal importance on economic, social, and environmental well-being and sustainability. To make this possible, the government should set the right policies that will allow all citizens, regardless of status in life, to access essential public services and will protect all segments of the population, especially the poor and the vulnerable, from various risks through effective social protection systems. The business sector, for its part, should explore ways and areas where it can be both profitable and socially responsible. Business owners and operators should embrace decent work principles, provide the best service to their customers, and care for the well-being of their employees, the community, and the environment. Meanwhile, the civil society should continue reaching out to sectors that do not have access to government channels. It should also strengthen its advocacy for more accountable and responsive governance and more sustainable business practices. The academe also has an important role to play. It should ensure that the new modes of delivering education and training under the new normal are accessible to all and will not widen economic and social inequalities. As individual citizens, we also need to start living more responsibly by adopting more sustainable lifestyles. We should start the reset and rebuild agenda with ourselves to effectively influence others. Collectively, we all need to work together. The government, business sector, academe, civil society, and the general public should join forces in pursuing a shared vision of an equitable, sustainable, and resilient post-pandemic Philippines. Know more about the DPRM and how you can participate by visiting its website.
Dapat po munang alamin or matukoy ang pangunahing problema ng bansa upang mapagtuunan ng pansin at mabigyan ng solusyon.
Walang problema sa pulisiya. Iayos lang ang pagpapatupad.
Bago patubas ang batas, pag-aralan mo na gusto ng government.
We should have specific goals, do research, and make a policy that is fair for everyone.
Mandato ng Philippine Institute for Development Studies o PIDS na gumawa ng mga pag-aaral at pananaliksik ng mga polisiya at programa ng pamahalaan at magbigay ng rekomendasyon sa mga mambabatas sa pagbabalangkas ng mga polisiyang makakatulong sa ating bansa. Sinusulong ng aming ahensya ang evidence-based policymaking upang bigyan diin ang kahalagahan ng polisiya na batay sa datos at policy research na sumusuri sa tunay na kalagayan ng ating mga komunidad. Napakahalaga ng policy research, lalo na sa mga panahong dumadaan sa krisis ang ating bansa.
Kapag ang pulisiya sinaliksik, wala stick!
Welcome to the PIDS webinar series. Before we start the webinar, we would like to give you a few reminders. For attendees, your microphone is muted upon entry. In case you have a question, the moderator will read it during the open forum. For those attending via Cisco WebEx, use the chat box located at the lower part of the screen. Click the chat icon, type your name and affiliation and your question, and send to all panelists. You may send your questions while the presentation is in progress. The moderator will read them during the open forum. For Facebook viewers, at least 2 questions from the comment section will be read by the moderator during the open forum. We will moderate all questions to ensure that they are relevant to the scope of the presentation. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your active participation.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our kickoff forum to herald the celebration of the Development Policy Research Month this September. I am Sheila Siar, your moderator. For 19 years, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies leads the entire nation in the observance of the Development Policy Research Month, or DPRM, which underscores the vital contribution of policy research to national development and nation building. To tell us more about the DPRM and this year's theme and what you can expect from our forum this morning, I now call on the President of PIDS, Dr. Aniceto Orbeta.
Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the presence of the following. From government, we have Department of Foreign Affairs Secretary, Assistant Secretary Eduardo Meñez, Department of Trade and Industries Assistant Secretary Anne-Claire Cabuchan, Bureau of Internal Revenue Assistant Commissioner Marieta Lorenzo, Senate Economic Planning Office Director General Ronald Goulding, House of Representatives Congressional Policy and Budget Research Department Director General Romulo Emmanuel Miral, House of Representatives Executive Director Congressional Policy and Budget Research Bureau Manuel Aquino, House of Representatives Executive Director for Budget and Tax Research Bureau Novel Bangsal, Directors, Regional Directors, Assistant Regional Directors, and other officials from the Senate and the House of Representatives, the National Economic Development Authority, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Department of Budget and Management, Department of Foreign Affairs, Department of Finance, Department of Trade and Industry, Department of Education, Department of Public Works and Highways, Civil Service Commission, Securities and Exchange Commission, Bureau of Local Government, Commission on Population and Development, and from the private sectors, you have the Philippine Exporters Confederation Incorporated Executive Vice President Sinin Perlada, Deloitte Audit Director Jenny Isabel Menes, Computrade Technology Philippines Director Teddy Sumolong, our usual friends from the media, thank you very much. And from the academy, let me acknowledge the following. Cagayan State University President Uduha Alvarado, Cavite State University President Felix Ingrid Govin Kapunihan, Polytechnic University of the Philippines Vice President Pascualito Gatan, Technical University of the Philippines Vice President Jonathan Monsad, University of the Philippines Biratov School of Economics Dean Joel Tan Torres, Polytechnic University of the Philippines Dean Lincoln Bautista, Bicol University Dean Alex Nepomuceno, Bicol University Director Arnolfo Malenes, Mariano Marcos State University Director Marilo Lucas, Mindanao State University Maguindanao Planning and Development Director Arceli Naraga, University of San Carlos Director Hope Yu, Foundation University Research Director Romario Ibanez, Holy Trinity College of General Santos Research Director Pauline Oclarit, University of San Carlos Assistant Director Elizabeth Remedio. From the CSOs, NGOs, and INGOs, we have the Philippine Association of Communication Educators President Rowena Capolong Reyes, U.S. ASEAN Business Council Chief Country Representative Elizabeth Cribasa, YMCA of La Union President Andrew Cesar Rimando, Rotary Club of Vismin Chapter President Winston Sia, Masaganang Sakahan Incorporated Director Daniel Agustin. Let me greet our guests and colleagues from the government, academia, civil society, media, private sector, as well as those who are watching through the PIDS Facebook page. Good morning and welcome to the 19th Development Policy Research Month, or DPRM Kickoff Forum. Every September, the Philippine Institute for Development Studies leads the entire nation in celebrating DPRM pursuant to Malacanang Proclamation 247 issued in September 22. The DPRM highlights the importance of policy research in crafting evidence-based plans, policies, and programs through the use of data and evidence in planning and policymaking by the country's leaders and decision makers. It also aims to raise the public awareness on socioeconomic issues. The theme, which is usually a current or emerging development issue, is selected every year. For 2021, we choose the theme Reset and Rebuild for a Better Philippines in a Post-Pandemic World, or in Filipino, muling magsimula at magtayo tungo sa mas matatag na Pilipinas sa pagkatapos ng pandemya. Sa Cebuano, pagtukod pag-usab paingon sa malambuong Pilipinas pagkahuman sa pandemya. Apologies, these are the only two languages that I currently speak relatively fluently. Some of you may notice that this is a follow-through of last year's theme, Innovating Governance for the New Normal. For this year, we came up with a more comprehensive and forward-looking theme. The theme aims to spread the message that to be able to rebuild from the setbacks brought by COVID-19 pandemic and create a better Philippines, we need to reset our paradigms and practice by balancing the interests of people, profit, and planet, and by balancing equal importance, by placing equal importance on economic, social, and environmental well-being and sustainability. To herald the start of the DPRM, we have invited panelists from the various sectors to join us today and share their insights on how to promote ethical business and green and inclusive recovery and develop a robust and healthy workforce to rebuild the country into a post-pandemic nation that is equitable, sustainable, and resilient. Our very own PIDS Research Fellow, Dr. Adoracion Navarro, will discuss the concept paper of this year's DPRM theme. Security and Exchange Commission Director for Corporate Governance and Finance Department, Attorney Rachel Esther Gumtang-Remalante, will talk about the stakeholders' principles in corporate governance and their applications to actual business settings. Meanwhile, Dr. Rosa Perez, a member of the National Resilience Council's Science and Technological Working Group and a senior research fellow at Manila Observatory, will discuss how we can build a resilient Philippines using science and technology-based public-private partnerships. We also highlight the labor sector, which is one of the most affected sectors in this pandemic. We will hear the government's response to assist workers affected by this crisis from the Department of Labor and Employment's Assistant Secretary, Dominique R. Tutay. We also have Mr. Arsenio M. Sabado, Chief Human Resource Officer of the Jollibee Foods Corporation. He will share some of this company's good practices in assisting their employees to cope with crisis while ensuring business continuity amid the pandemic. To our invited panelists, thank you for taking time to join us in today's forum. Before I end, I would like to thank our DPRM's steering committee members for their support on this annual celebration, namely the National Economic and Development Authority, Civil Service Commission, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Philippine Information Agency, Philippine Management Staff, Presidential Management Staff, Department of Interior and Local Government, Department of Budget and Management, Senate Economic Planning Office, Congressional Policy and Budget Research Department, DOLE, Climate Change Commission, the SEC. The PIDS greatly appreciates your support in organizing and promoting the DPRM. We look forward for more years of productive partnership with all of you. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the program and have a good day.
And thank you very much, Dr. Orbeta. So Dr. Orbeta has told us about this year's theme and our key message. So let's comprehend it further by listening to Dr. Adora Navarro, who will help us unpack the DPRM theme. The presentation that she will deliver is a joint effort between her and her fellow researchers at PIDS, namely Dr. Margarita Gonzalez and Dr. Chris Francisco Abrigo. Before rejoining PIDS last year, Dr. Navarro was Undersecretary for Regional Development at the National Economic and Development Authority from November 2016 to June 2020, where she supervised the regional development staff at the central office and the 15 regional offices across the country. Dr. Navarro's research interests are regional development, energy and infrastructure, and public-private partnerships. She holds a doctorate in economics from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, a Master of Public Administration degree, major in economic policy management from Columbia University, and a Master of Arts degree in economics from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Adora, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Sheila. I hope that my audio is coming in clear. Can you give me a
Yes.
thumbs up at least?
Yes, it's a
Sheila,
bit
you're the
choppy,
one I
Adora.
can see.
Yes,
Okay,
it's a
thank
bit
you.
choppy, so
Good
you
morning,
may
everyone.
Adora, you are choppy, so you may want to turn on your video, and you can turn it on later during the open forum because you're choppy. Yes, thank you. You may proceed.
Yeah. So my video is now off. Okay. So thank you. At least you've seen me for a few seconds. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to this virtual kickoff of our Development Policy Research Month, or DPM. And thank you for your interest. I've seen some participants from the NEDA regional offices, and one NRO actually greeted me. So I'm glad that you're here and you're interested in our celebration of the Policy Research Month, ang buwan ng pananaliksik. So our theme is Reset and Rebuild for a Better Philippines in the Post-Pandemic World. And the theme of the DPRM, next slide please, Weng, is also the theme of our upcoming Annual Public Policy Conference, or APPC, on September 14, 16, 21, and 23. As already mentioned by Sheila, so we are the members of the scientific committee, myself, Dr. Maggie Gonzalez, and Dr. Chris Francisco. So let me give you some preliminaries. Next slide. Given the huge uncertainty on how and when the coronavirus disease 2019 or COVID-19 pandemic will end, the question of whether there will be a post-pandemic world has arisen. So note that the only infectious disease that has been eradicated in the history of humankind is smallpox. Then the end of the 1918 flu pandemic came when much of the world's geographic areas achieved herd immunity through natural infection, and that was sometime in the middle of 1920. So large-scale immunization is now being pushed to fast-track the attainment of herd immunity, or yung concept na the point when there are enough people with antibodies that the SARS-CoV-2 virus is unable to successfully find enough hosts that will transmit it. Then governments are hoping that we could achieve herd immunity through unavoidable natural infection and deliberately scaled up vaccination across the globe. But the highly transmissible Delta variant and still ongoing mutations of the virus changed that. So rather than herd immunity in the medium term, we, the PIDS Scientific Committee, are looking at the post-pandemic world, both based on current knowledge, as a future where the virus is under control. So hindi herd immunity in the medium term, no, but control of the virus. So it's under control because in most parts of the world, countries are able to suppress the spread of the virus through a combination of vaccination, treatment, prevention, good public policies, and individuals knowing how to live with the virus. Next slide. Now, equipped with the assessment that the pandemic will eventually end, yung ating policymakers can begin to think ahead and assess scenarios of possible futures. Possible post-COVID-19 scenarios have already been explored by various authors, and some results are presented here. So let me first discuss 5 scenarios based on varying levels of globalization and collaboration. So we have a responsible globalization, an interconnected world where valuing society, sustainable development, and protection of human life are shared principles of the global community. And then we can have a chaotic globalization, a world in which inequalities increase significantly. No, there's opportunism, there's growing rivalry, and we can also have a world of walls scenario, no? A fractured world. There's an upsurge in nationalist values, protectionism, and so on. And conflicts grow substantially. Then international institutions lose their legitimacy. We could also have cold peace scenario, highly polarized world. There are two opposing blocs, no? China and EU and the US on the other end. Each remains politically stable and grows economically, but global collaborative efforts collapse. And the fifth scenario is an adaptive mosaic scenario, or a localized world focused on sustainability, where countries collaborate across borders, but resilience and self-sufficiency are emphasized, and we reduce dependence on global markets and supply chains. Okay, next slide. Another scenario building based on adaptation and learning is this, no? We have particularist retreat, or a business as usual scenario, and it promotes taking refuge in the nation state, in the government, and disregards the global interrelatedness of COVID-19 issues, and ignores existing interdependencies. Or we could have adaptation scenario, wherein the state, the market, and civil society communicate and adjust to complexities. So they learn, no? And multilateralism at the international is strengthened. And states invest in public health, and markets deepen cooperation. Civil society promotes a responsible consumption, subsidiarity, self-care, and sustainable development. Another scenario is what's called collective learning scenario. So this is the most demanding among the three scenarios. And there is global governance on concerns like public goods, risk reduction, and catastrophe prevention. Governments prioritize public policies around the notion of care and reducing inequalities. Markets prioritize short distance logistics and localization of production and consumption, and also essential activities. And we evolve into what's called prosumers. No, we produce and consume many goods and services locally. Next slide. In another scenario building, one that emphasizes that we live in an equal world where achieving the SDGs may be more feasible for some countries than for others, business as usual is predicted to happen if the civil society is weak and the critical voices and social demands are not consolidated. So this is the most pessimistic view, the business as usual scenario, and it posits that there will be no major changes. The recovery will be based on tried and tested consumerism-based capitalist system, similar to the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. But there can be alternative scenarios if critical voices and social demands are consolidated post-pandemic. The first alternative is what's called paradigm shift, which is associated with a chaotic situation. So the chaos will bring in the paradigm shift, where COVID-19 causes the global economic order to fall apart and puts the environmental and climate crisis at the center of the need for recovery. A less radical scenario is a planned or managed transition. And here, the pandemic is the trigger for calls similar to the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is already being proposed by developed countries. And that's so that we can attain sustainable development. So in this managed transition, a gradual process of change takes place in the short and medium term in the areas of sustainable consumption, reduction of the economy in scale, circular economy, green economy, and blue economy. Okay, next slide. So in this context, we need to work toward a better Philippines in a post-pandemic world. So the theme of our, next slide please, of our DPRM and APPC invokes the following actions: reset, rebuild, and imagining a better Philippines. So reset meaning to clear errors, remove problematic applications, or put away things that entangle. Rebuild meaning to make extensive changes, demolish obsolete rules, processes, and systems, and provide new ones. And the team also invites us to imagine a better Philippines, and it encourages us to enable a more effective functioning of our systems and processes. Next slide. Our theme is also attuned to global developments and has a main theme, resetting capitalism, and three sub-themes, namely stakeholder capitalism, green and inclusive recovery, and robust and healthy workforce. Next slide. In the scenario building exercises of various authors, a subtle criticism of capitalism runs as an undercurrent in the assessments of globalization, international order, market, sustainable development, and inequality. So pondering about the future has compelled thinkers to explore what the current flaws of the capitalist system are and how this can be fixed. Particularly, the World Economic Forum recommended a so-called Great Reset. WEF founder Schwab argued that we need a great reset of capitalism, given that the long-term consequences of COVID-19 will exacerbate the ongoing climate and social crisis. Okay, so next slide. So that's our main theme for the first webinar in our APPC. And the questions that we must answer is, how must we reset our ways of life and rebuild toward a better normal? How can we build new foundations for the world's economic and social systems? How can we steer the market towards fairer outcomes? And how can we ensure that investments advance shared goals such as equality and sustainability? Next slide. Now, our first sub-theme, ethical business, tells us that it is opportune to revisit how businesses can be profitable and ethical at the same time. So the relevant question is, which economic system would best serve us today? Shareholder capitalism or stakeholder capitalism? When we speak of shareholder capitalism, this means that the interests of only one stakeholder, the owner, dominate. And the goal is to maximize profits and shareholder value. Whereas stakeholder capitalism, this means that all stakeholders are considered, all of their interests are considered, so including the interests of employees, customers, and suppliers. And the focus is on long-term value creation. Okay, next slide. And that thinking is actually gaining traction in the US, in developing Asia, and even in the Philippines. Like in late 2020, the Philippine Business Group signed what's called Covenant for Shared Prosperity. And the Philippine Securities and Exchange Commission has already supported elements of stakeholder capitalism, and it's now enshrined in the Code of Corporate Governance, which took effect in 2017. Okay, next slide. So the relevant questions under this sub-theme is, will a stakeholder model foster or hinder corporate or economic growth in a post-COVID environment? What kinds of trade-offs can be expected? How willing are businesses to follow a stakeholder model? Will they be inclined to adopt universally accepted environmental, social, and governance or ESG metrics, which are designed to help achieve the SDGs? By the way, try to look at some Philippine companies in the energy sector, and they are starting to adopt ESG metrics as you will be able to see in their websites, they're starting to adopt ESG metrics. Another relevant question is what will be the effect on firms, on financial markets? And on the latter, do we have an investor base that is cognizant of the long-term benefits of a sustainability or stakeholder mindset among firms? And should stakeholder principles be further enshrined in corporate governance laws? So ano pa yung kulang? And then what are the pros and cons of codification? What have been the good, bad outcomes of the recent changes in the corporate governance code? Okay, next slide. The second sub-theme is on green and inclusive recovery. And this is because there's evidence that increasing human pressure on the natural environment may drive disease emergence. That's one important lesson from the COVID-19 pandemic. And also part of the lessons from the continuing research on infectious diseases is the need to regulate human activities in the natural environment, and therefore building green and blue economy resilience must be emphasized. Okay, next slide. And in building resilience, this entails conservation of green and blue ecosystems as well as climate change adaptation and mitigation. And we need to look at climate targets and well-being targets as complementary. And this has implications for food security, energy and use, waste management, conservation of ecosystems, and preparing for climate change. The relevant questions, next slide, in this sub-theme are as follows. So who are the crucial stakeholders? In what areas of green and blue economy can PPPs flourish? What are the trade-offs? In which sectors are the trade-offs prominent? How accessible are innovations, especially for developing countries such as the Philippines? And what is the extent of our capacity to research and develop solutions on our own? And the next slide. And then our last topic for the conference is, and for the overall celebration of our Development Policy Research Month is robust and healthy workforce. And this is because COVID-19 highlighted existing health inequities faced by low compensation workers, as they are more likely to encounter poor work-related conditions. As you can see from this slide, the conditions they are exposed in. Next slide. And we also emphasize that while digitalization and the fourth industrial revolution have facilitated the transition to remote work and also distance learning, there are differences in the ability to access technologies, and that exacerbate existing inequalities. Next slide. So the relevant questions here are as follows. What needs to be fixed in social protection systems? How has digital technology been used to cope with the impacts of COVID? And what are good models around the world that we can emulate? Then what is the future of training and reskilling? And what should the new and better normal in this in the areas of labor, employment, and reskilling should look like? Okay, next slide. So in closing, let me highlight that in thinking about the post-pandemic world, the epidemiological path of COVID-19 in the world and in the Philippines, and the track of recovery programs of the Philippine government as they evolve up to this time should be used as baseline scenario in our assessments. We invite you all to think of possible futures and reimagine a better Philippines post-pandemic given such baseline. And more importantly, our ideas of what kinds of resetting and rebuilding will be necessary. Thank you for your attention. Stay safe always, and let us learn to live with the virus.
And thank you very much, Dora, for that concise and meaningful presentation. Friends, we invited representatives from the government and the private sector to give their insights on the theme, particularly on the sub-theme that is most relevant to the mission and operations of the organization that they represent. As what we heard from Dr. Navarro, the business sector plays a crucial role in the reset and rebuild agenda by embracing the so-called ethical business or stakeholder capitalism. Our first presenter will tell us how her organization is promoting this concept among the country's publicly listed companies. And perhaps she can also tell us some of the good practices that her office has seen so far. I am referring to Attorney Rachel Esther Gumtang-Remalante, Director of the Corporate Governance and Finance Department of the Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC. Director Remalante leads in the development and implementation of corporate governance policies, as well as in providing the necessary rules and regulations to investment companies, financing and lending companies, and in the monitoring of companies under the jurisdiction of her department. Among her notable accomplishments include the issuance of the Sustainability Reporting Guidance, which was recognized by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. She obtained her law degree from the University of Santo Tomas and has completed her academic requirements in executive master in development management, major in public finance from the Asian Institute of Management. Director Remalante, the floor is now yours.
Thank you and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. President of the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, Dr. Aniceto Orbeta, Director Sheila Siar, organizers of this webinar, distinguished speakers, and participants, pleasant good morning to all. So on behalf of the Securities and Exchange Commission, or the SEC, allow me to extend my heartfelt greetings to all. It is an honor and privilege for me to be here in this webinar amid the COVID-19 pandemic to participate in the 19th Development Policy Research Month, or the DPRM, kickoff forum, Reset and Rebuild for a Better Philippines in the Post-Pandemic World. And of course, to speak on behalf of the SEC about the stakeholder principles in corporate governance and provide a little bit examples later on applications on the business settings. And of course, another topic that I will be discussing this morning is about SEC's initiatives in promoting sustainability through the sustainability reporting. So next slide, please. So in discussing the stakeholder principles in corporate governance as applied here in the Philippines, especially to the publicly listed companies, or the PLCs, let me first share a brief history about how the SEC was able to incorporate this principle in our rules and regulations and other issuances. So as early as 2002, the SEC issued its first Code of Corporate Governance pursuant to the SEC Memorandum Circular Number 2, Series of 2002. In the said code, it already mentioned about the stakeholders in the definition of the corporate governance and its role in ensuring that the management enhances the value of a corporation as it competes in an increasingly global market. Not only did it recognize the role of stakeholder, but brought forth the rights of the stakeholders, such as to expect that an institution is being run in a prudent and sound manner. They are expected to formulate a clear policy on communicating or relating with them accurately, effectively, and sufficiently. The company is also expected to render an accounting to them regularly in order to serve their legitimate interests. They have to maintain a sound system of internal control to safeguard stakeholders' investment and the company's assets, and for the board to commit at all times to full disclosure of material information dealings, which includes the filing of required information for the interests of stakeholders. So in relation to this, the covered companies, including of course, the PLCs, were required to file their manual of corporate governance that incorporates the responsibilities of the board, qualifications, disqualifications, specific duties and responsibilities, and of course, the role of the board and the management to its stakeholders. So in 2009, this was amended with the Revised Corporation Governance Code, or the RCCG. This is under the SEC Memorandum Circular Number 6, Series of 2009. While the revised code shifted its focus more on the shareholders, we can still see in the regulations that emphasis was still given to the board's role in ensuring that the company complies with all applicable laws, rules and regulations, and of course, identifying the sectors in the community where they operate, and to formulate a clear policy of accurate, timely, and effective communication with them. So in 2012, the SEC had a reorganization, a simple reorganization, which led to the creation of a corporate governance division. So this is under our department, current department now, the Corporate Governance and Finance Department. And this division was able to focus on the implementation of corporate governance initiatives and provide policy direction on the implementation of good corporate governance practices, especially for the entities that are governed by the SEC. In 2014, the SEC issued a SEC Memorandum Circular number 9, which amended our revised Code of Corporate Governance. In this revision, the SEC required the amendment of the Manual of Corporate Governance that should include the role of stockholders and other stakeholders. So this memorandum circular also provided a new definition for corporate governance, which now includes and refers to stakeholders that include, among others, customers, employees, suppliers, financiers, government, and community in which they operate. So in 2015, or in other parts of the world, there was the G20 OECD Principles of Corporate Governance, and this was already endorsed and published. So these principles help policymakers evaluate and improve the legal, regulatory, and institutional framework for corporate governance. And this provided guidance for stock exchanges, investors, corporations, and others that have a role in the process of developing good corporate governance. Please take note that the first edition of this one was issued in 1999, and the principles have become the international benchmark in governance. So relevant in the principles for the present topic is that it recognizes the interests of employees and other stakeholders and their important role in contributing to the long-term success and performance of the company. Other factors relevant to a company's decision-making processes were also included, such as environmental, anti-corruption, or ethical concerns. In Chapter 4 thereof, focus on the role of stakeholders was emphasized and laid down in the principle that the corporate governance framework should recognize the rights of stakeholders established by law or through mutual agreements and encourage active cooperation between corporations and stakeholders in creating wealth, jobs, and sustainability of financially sound enterprises. So the OECD further elaborated that corporations should recognize that the contributions of stakeholders constitute a valuable source for building competitive and profitable companies. It is therefore in the long-term interest of corporations to foster wealth-creating cooperation among stakeholders. That is why, in 2015, the SEC issued the Philippine Corporate Governance Blueprint, or the CG Blueprint. This was used by the SEC as its corporate governance roadmap for the next 5 years, and it provided direction in promoting a strong corporate governance culture not only for the PLCs but to other enterprises as well. The CG Blueprint covered all relevant areas in the corporate governance, including the G20, which I mentioned a while ago, OECD Principles of Corporate Governance. Through the use of this blueprint, SEC raised the corporate governance awareness and standards to a level at least at par with the global standards that is aimed to contribute to the development of the Philippine capital markets. Please take note that when the SEC released the blueprint, we have already recognized that in order that the Philippines have a stronger corporate governance regime, the valuable and indispensable cooperation and collective contribution of the corporations, regulators, and other stakeholders must be at hand, or everyone has a buy-in for the effective implementation of its recommendations. So taken from the blueprint is SEC's issuance of SEC Memorandum Circular number 19, series of 2016, or the Code of Corporate Governance for PLCs. I think this was mentioned a while ago. So in the said MC, 3 principles were provided for the duties of stakeholders. And these are principles 14, 15, and 16. So Principle 14 provides respecting rights of stakeholders and effective redress for violation of stakeholders' rights. So the right of stakeholders established by law, by contractual relations, and through voluntary commitments must be respected. Where stakeholders' rights and or interests are at stake, the stakeholders should have the opportunity to obtain prompt, effective redress for the violation of their rights. Principle 15 is encouraging employees' participation. There must be a mechanism for employee participation and should be developed to create a symbiotic environment, realize the company's goals, and participate in its corporate governance processes. And Principle 16, which is encouraging sustainability and social responsibility. The company should be socially responsible in all its dealings with the communities where it operates. It should ensure that its interactions serve its environment and stakeholders in a positive and progressive manner that is fully supportive of its comprehensive and balanced development. To flesh out how the companies are complying with these principles, companies are expected to disclose said compliance in the Integrated Annual Corporate Governance Report as required under Memorandum Circular Number 15, Series of 2017, or the Integrated Annual Corporate Governance Report, which is filed annually. Please take note that companies follow a comply or explain regime in following the principles and recommendations in the Code of Corporate Governance for PLCs. So this approach combines voluntary compliance with mandatory disclosure, where the companies do not have to comply with the code, but they must state in their annual corporate governance reports whether they comply with the code provisions, identify any areas of non-compliance, and explain the reasons for non-compliance. And to finish off my discussion on this topic, the SEC is very fortunate that some of the stakeholder principles and recommendations were actually embodied in the revised Corporation Code of the Philippines. And these are Section 166, Section 167, 168, 169, and 172. And specific to these provisions are they look into graft and corrupt practices, of course, those who are tolerating them and those who are assisting them or those who are engaged in graft and corrupt practices are actually provided with penalties against them. And of course, there's also the provision under 169, the retaliation against whistleblowers, and of course, liability of aiders and abettors and with other secondary liability. Next slide, please. So now I go to SEC's initiatives in promoting sustainability. So what is sustainability? So according to Brundtland Report of the World Commission on Environment and Development, it is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So going back to the Code of Corporate Governance for publicly listed companies, Principle 10 thereof provides that the board should have a clear and focused policy on the disclosure of non-financial information with emphasis on the management of economic, environmental, social, and governance issues of its business, which underpins sustainability. Companies should adopt a globally recognized standard framework in reporting sustainability and non-financial issues. So that's why on February 15, 2019, the SEC issued SEC Memorandum Circular Number 4, Series of 2019, to promote sustainability reporting and make it relevant for Philippine publicly listed companies. So the guidelines is intended to help PLCs assess and manage non-financial performance across economic, environmental, and social aspects of their organization, and enable PLCs to measure and monitor their contributions towards achieving universal targets of sustainability, such as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the national policies and programs such as the Ambition Natin 2040. Also, please allow me to flex a little. So in 2019, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, or the UNCTAD, recognized the SEC for promoting best practices in sustainability and reporting on the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. During its 36th meeting of the Intergovernmental Working Group of Experts on International Standards of Accounting and Reporting, or the ISAR, held on October 30, 2019 in Geneva, Switzerland. So flex po ako, nandun po ako sa picture. Also this year, the SEC was again recognized for its advocacy and commitment to corporate governance, and we were awarded by the Cambridge 3G Awards. So I'm very proud to say that our efforts at the SEC did not go unnoticed. Also, let me share a little bit of some statistics on the submission of the reports for the 2019 sustainability reporting. So as of 31 August 2021, there are about 246 out of 271 PLCs that have submitted their sustainability reports. This is actually 90.77% of the PLCs that submitted their reports for the covered period of 2019. This is in fact a big improvement from the 2017 KPMG survey on corporate responsibility reporting, where less than 22% of publicly listed companies have published a report on sustainability impacts and performance. So let me just share why the sustainability reporting matters. So many corporate managers still believe that dealing with ESG issues would entail sacrificing some financial return. This view is outdated and no longer holds true. Please note that sustainable business practices and reporting does not only improve a company's brand, it also has positive financial implications. So an Oxford study showed that the sound sustainability standards lowered the cost of capital by 90%. Further, it was shown that good environmental, social, and good governance practices resulted in better operational performance of firms by 85%. And stock price performance of companies is positively influenced by good sustainability practice by 80%. This is the business case for sustainability translated into financial figures. In fact, now that the business practices of sustainability and reporting has become more pronounced during this pandemic, companies that have been reporting way before the regulators or the SEC required this are more resilient and were quick to adopt during this pandemic. They were able to immediately identify the problem areas, engage their stakeholders, provide solutions, and adapted to the new normal. More companies gave more focus on the social aspect of the business, giving more importance to health concerns, providing safe and healthy work environment, taking care of their well-being and mental health. This is more apparent when companies prioritize in providing vaccination to all their employees, one company actually mentioned to us, even noting that it is now almost at 100% vaccination. Those who were not vaccinated were actually on maternity leave or were not qualified at the moment to get the vaccination. So as the business landscape is ever changing and evolving, it became imperative for most of the companies to train and to retool their employees to new skills and provided their means to give career advancement. Of course, employment security and stability becomes more important now as we all wade through the VUCA world. So last slide, please. And this is to end my presentation. I would like to share two quotes. The other one is a hugot from the movie General Luna. While it does not seem on all fours with the present topic, but its statement provides the same impact all the same. So it goes, negosyo o kalayaan, bayan o sarili, pumili ka. So it is important to have an inclusive stance in business. Otherwise, we might be left behind. And the other statement is sustainability is everyone's responsibility. So we should not expect other people to do sustainability practices for us, but we must also do our role in making our planet last for the next generation. In short, we must be remarkable ancestors who champion sustainability to our descendants. So last slide na lang po. And this is my parting shot. So thank you again for inviting SEC. And for this last slide, for more information, updates, and announcements from the SEC, please visit our Facebook website, Facebook page at Philippine SEC and also visit our website. And you may also email your queries on corporate governance and sustainability at cgfd at _cgd@sec.gov.ph. So thank you again for this opportunity and a pleasant good morning to everyone.
Thank you very much, Director Remalante, for that very insightful presentation. We greatly appreciate your discussion of the stakeholder principles in corporate governance, as well as your update on SEC's initiatives in promoting sustainability. We will hear more from Director Remalante during our open forum. But for now, let us move to our next panelist. So from the concept of ethical business or stakeholder capitalism, let us move to green and inclusive recovery, which is also one of the sub-themes. And to give her insights on this topic is a renowned hydrometeorologist and climate and disaster risk and adaptation expert. It is my honor to introduce to all of you Dr. Rosa Perez, a research fellow at the Manila Observatory and member of the Science and Technology Working Group of the National Resilience Council. Prior to her retirement, she is the chief of the Flood Forecasting Division of PAGASA, and she is also one of the lead authors in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Working Group 2 for the 4th, 5th, and 6th assessment cycles from 2004 to 2022. She also co-authored 2 special reports on managing the risk of extreme events and disasters to advance climate change adaptation and the global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Dr. Perez, the floor is now yours.
Salamat, and magandang umaga po kay Dr. Aniceto Orbeta sa mga lahat.
Dr. Perez, if you can increase the volume po.
Is it better now?
A bit better now, but if you could increase it further, that would be better.
Maybe 100%. Maybe I can just the volume of my voice.
Sige po, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, salamat po. Magandang umaga po kay Dr. Aniceto Orbeta, presidente ng PIDS at sa lahat ng mga taga-PID. Mga na nandito at nakikinig sa Facebook. Ang presentation of the national about green recovery. This is the outline of my presentation. I'm going to give messages from the most recent report, science-based from the assessment IPC.
Dr. Perez, I'm sorry to interrupt you, ma'am. Maaari po kayang mailapit sa inyong bibig ang microphone?
Yeah, I'm trying to use
yes.
my headphone.
Yes, ma'am. It is better now, ma'am. Thank you.
Sige. Thank you. And I'm going to talk about opportunities for green or blue recovery. It's color-coded. And look at one of the strategies and give example on the partnership for resilience and sustainability. Next slide, please. The working group 1 in the AR6 of IPCC has released this report around in August of this year. And these are the key messages that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean, and land. The report describes possible futures depending on how dramatically the world cuts emissions. But even the most severe reduction are unlikely to prevent global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial temperature. Without immediate deep emission cuts, average temperature will keep rising. And weather will or is getting extreme. We have seen it not only in the Philippines, but in most places around the world. So it will become more frequent, more intense, such as heat waves. Tropical cyclones are getting stronger and more frequent. We have also fire season getting longer and droughts. And they also, the report also says that Arctic summers could soon be free of ice by 2050. So what is the meaning of this? When the ice melt into water, instead of reflecting the heat back to atmosphere, it absorbs the heat. So it contributes to further warming. And there are some physical impacts of this warming that are already committed. So, for example, sea level will continue to rise, even if we keep the temperature increase by 1.5 degrees Celsius. That means, but it will continue to increase, but at a lower rate. That is happening now. And we are running out of time in terms of carbon budget. Carbon budget is the term used referring to how much more or how much additional carbon can we release to the atmosphere. So right now we are already at 1.1. I mean, when I say we, it's a global average. We are already at 1.1 degree Celsius. And this small window of opportunity to reduce are becoming smaller. So it is projected that by 2030, so that's less than 10 years from now, we will be, that particular threshold will be crossed. We will blow that carbon budget if our global emissions will continue at the rate that we are having now. Okay, next slide, please. So this is the emissions reductions in 2020 associated with measures to reduce the spread of COVID-19. The IPCC found out that the global lockdown has resulted to a large drop in emissions on the average by about 27%. But this drop in carbon dioxide emissions had no detectable impact on atmospheric carbon dioxide. That means it has no effect on the climate change status that we are in now. So if we consider all the accumulated carbon dioxide that has been emitted to the atmosphere, that particular drop is very small, and it is not detectable at all. And so this temporary halt to normal life that we have now seen with successive lockdowns is not enough to stop climate change. It is also not sustainable. Like climate change, COVID-19 has hit the most vulnerable the hardest. We need to find ways to reduce emissions without the economic and social impacts of lockdowns, and find solutions that also promote health, welfare, and equity. Next slide. And this solution includes a green recovery and just transition. Green recovery is a widely adopted name for a proposed package of environmental, regulatory, and fiscal reforms to recover prosperity after the COVID-19 pandemic. And as the graphics here, we can see that this is a embodiment of a harmonious balance of people through human development and from high to low inequity. Planet, considering the planetary health, and profit, which is green economic growth and development using circular economy. Next slide, please. In March 2021, the Asian Development Bank spearheaded a policy analysis of why implementing green recovery is critical for Southeast Asia. This green recovery will reduce the risk of future pandemic, mitigate and adapt to the impact of climate change, create jobs, increase competitiveness, and meet the sustainable development goals. Therefore, pursuing green opportunities in agriculture through productive and regenerative agriculture, clean energy transition, sustainable urban development and transport models, healthy and productive oceans, and circular economy models can help us or has the potential to make this green growth a reality. Next slide. Next slide. Yes, thank you. There are also opportunities for blue recovery, such as investing in sewerage and wastewater infrastructure, investing in coastal and marine ecosystem restoration and protection, investing in sustainable community-led mariculture, incentivize sustainable ocean-based renewable energy, and transition to zero-emission marine transport. From my building back better should go beyond the green recovery that is being spoken about and embrace a blue recovery. That is what is being floated in some literatures. But from my point of view, this green or blue recovery is actually better if taken as an integrated approach, which we have already recognized earlier before the pandemic, which we call the reef to from the ridge to reef approach, which means you do some good practices in the terrestrial overland, which will also benefit the ocean and waters. So I believe that it should not be a matter of selection, which one is better, a green or blue recovery, but an integrated one will be the best. But the question here is, we can ask is, how do we get there? If these are the opportunities, how will we get to that recovery phase? There are at least 3 strategies. One is by building mechanisms that can produce a lasting shift toward human and natural system resilience through capacity building, institutionalization, and knowledge generation. Secondly, implementation of targeted policy interventions focus on the green and blue or whatever color it is, growth opportunities, and identifying sustainable sources of financing for these growth opportunities. Let me elaborate on the first one. Next slide, please. The strategy towards resilience and sustainable development by using risk information. We need to understand this because because hazards are becoming less predictable. And by the way, when I say hazard, that also include biological hazards where pandemic are included. Exposure is growing, vulnerability is compounding. So that a whole society approach, including everyone, national governments, non-governmental organization, regional organization, public, private sectors, individuals must come together and use towards a risk-informed, sustainable development, which address accountability, gender equality, reducing risk, increasing resilience, etc. Next slide, please. Sustainable development has been defined earlier, and from the UN General Assembly, it's a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. While resilient development, as proposed by the IPCC in 2014 Fifth Assessment Report, is a development that enables people, socioeconomic and environmental systems to cope or adapt to a hazardous event or trend or disturbance, responding or reorganizing in ways that maintain their essential function, identity, and structure, while also maintaining the capacity for adaptation, learning, and transformation. Development cannot be sustainable if it is not resilient. So this is an example of an initiative towards resilience and sustainability through a public-private partnership. The National Resilience Council is focused on strengthening dynamic collaborations between public and private sectors to promote science and technology-based solutions to multiple challenges of climate and disaster risk, enhancing internal capacities of the local government units through evidence-informed risk governance, and sustaining high-level collaboration between government and industry, and implementing the resilient local government unit program. So on the right-hand side of this slide, we can see that the council is really very lean, and it relies on a multi-stakeholder partnerships. We have co-chairs from the private sector, which is now occupied by Mr. Hansi from the Prime, SM Prime, and the government, which is co-chaired by Secretary Delphine Lorenzano of the Department of National Defense. The convener of this council is former Ambassador Roberto Romulo, and is being presided by Ms. Antonia Yulo Loizaga. And so we have here four four vice chairs for government, for private sector, for scientific organization, and for civil societies and non-government organizations. The goals are the goals of the NRC are to build a resilient Philippines through science and technology-based public-private partnership, enhance internal capacities of LGU, strengthen and sustain high-level collaboration between the national government agencies and industry, and implement the resilient local government unit program with a core group of LGUs. Next slide, please. NRC understood that the complex and dynamic nature of risk in the Philippines' unique pattern of development requires transdisciplinary approaches that necessitated the active participation of different sectors and communities. themselves. So we have here localized metrics co-designed and co-owned by the participating local government units. We have here 6 areas. On the left-hand side, we have evidence-informed and inclusive leadership and risk governance, which aim to increase leadership commitment and competencies, empower stakeholders, and integrate development planning, implementation, and evaluation. We also have here human development systems, local economy, infrastructure, and environment. And the impacts are they are working towards the impact of resilient local government systems to reduce debts, damage to properties, infrastructure, and agriculture. And last but not the least is development continuity. So for business, it's the business continuity planning, for example. Next slide. Let me go into the means of implementation for this program. So the Resilient LGUs program consists of having integrated risk assessment and the use of resilience scorecard, where risk and performance assessment are done. And there is also a component on competency development to build strategic partnership and coherence. The global framework that connects with this program are the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Paris Agreement. So these 3 global agreements are kind of the foundation of this resilient LGU program. Next slide, please. We have a 3-year, 2-track program. For the first year, it's prepare, which include baselining and setting up of those information and doing the climate and disaster risk assessment. And then next, followed by the adapt phase, which institutionalize those initiatives to see how can we improve the existing system in the local government to reduce risk. And the third one is the transform component. It's the implementation or co-creation among the participants. How can we change existing systems to achieve resilience and sustainability? So these are the 2 tracks is towards leadership, governance, and science and technology. Next slide, please. The competency development is a linkage between among science, policy, and practice, and is done in collaboration with the academe and scientific organization to empower the local government unit and to provide skills and develop the skills of the LGUs towards green and resilient development. So it is an institutionalization of transdisciplinary action research for evidence-informed decision support system. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize that green recovery or blue recovery anchored in sustainable and resilient development principle is not a destination. It is a journey towards some plausible future which depend on the choices that we made today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Perez, for your very enlightening presentation. Thank you very much for underscoring the importance of looking at sustainable development using a resilience framework, as well as emphasizing the value of multi-stakeholder partnerships, science-based planning and decision-making, as well as engaging our LGUs. All of which are being advocated by the National Resilience Council. We'll hear more from Dr. Perez during the open forum. So at this point, let us move to our next panelist. So our last topic, which is our last two panelists will talk about our last topic, which is about promoting a robust and healthy workforce. And our conversation on this topic will not be completely. We will not hear from our labor department, and we are honored to have with us Assistant Secretary Dominique Tutay, who is the concurrent director of the Bureau of Local Employment, which is responsible for promoting full and decent employment through policy and program development. ASEC Tutay is currently engaged in measures toward employment and economic recovery, particularly on the National Employment Recovery Strategy. Her initiatives include increasing employability of the youth, developing career information guides, facilitating decent jobs, and promoting entrepreneurship, and assessing the 21st century skills of our workforce. She has a Master of Development Planning degree from the University of Queensland, a Master of Arts degree, major in Development Education from the University of Santo Tomas, and a Bachelor of Mass Communications degree from Silliman University. ASEC Tutay, ma'am, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Sheila. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So thank you very much. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat, and congratulations po sa PIDS para po dito sa virtual kick-off forum ng 19th Development Policy Research Month. So for the theme sustaining a healthy and robust workforce, our contribution in today's forum focuses on the following. In the next slide, we'll talk about employment landscape during the pandemic. What are the policies and programs to mitigate the impact in terms of employment? And of course, on our way to economic recovery, we'll be dealing more with National Employment Recovery Strategy 2021-2022. Okay, next slide. We'll see that employment was and is negatively affected by interruptions in economic activities. Last year, we registered records highs and lows in our key employment indicators, with employment rate at 89.7% and unemployment rate at 10.3%, based on the average of the 4 labor force surveys conducted by the Philippine Statistical Authority. This is the lowest and the highest, respectively, since 2005. While we're seeing clear signs of the economy's recovery this year, the reimposition of the ECQ in Metro Manila in March and in August, however, set us a step back with an upswing in unemployment recorded in April, and employment dipping down to 91.3% again. We have yet to see the impact on employment of the lockdown that we had experienced this August. Next slide, please. The same scenario is felt by our youth labor force, where its annual average participation rate hit its lowest at 35.7% year on year. Unemployment rate also of youth soared at 21.5%, and that is equivalent to about 1.5 million youth unemployed. Next slide. I borrowed this slide from NEDA in its presentation at the House of Representatives just last week, and you would see that job creation is highly correlated to the level of quarantine that we are experiencing, particularly in Metro Manila. So nandyan po yung mga red bars that would give us a very negative impact in terms of youth or in terms of people being unemployed during at the height of the quarantine ECQ levels in Metro Manila and also nationwide. Next slide, please. At the onset of the pandemic, the Philippine government passed into law the Bayanihan 1 and 2. The Bayanihan law provides social amelioration assistance in the form of cash transfer, emergency employment, and basic goods to individuals and households. It also supported the frontliners by giving hazard pay to workers in the public sector who are at the forefront of delivering basic services during the hard lockdown. Hazard pay in the private sector, especially the health and medical workers, was highly encouraged. Micro, small, and medium enterprises were also assisted. Their workers have been prioritized in the granting of the government's financial support. Currently, the national government General Appropriation Act is being deliberated in Congress with COVID-19 related expenses and programs still a priority. Meanwhile, the National Employment Recovery Strategy, anchored on the Recharge PH and the updated Philippine Development Plan, is also in full swing. In the next slide, the DOLE and the DTI issued policy guidelines dealing with workplace safety protocols and various alternative work arrangements and flexibilities. Next slide. As we all know, the department also provided assistance for workers both in the formal and informal sectors, including our returning OFWs. So in total, under Bayanihan 1 and 2, we were able to assist a little over 4 million workers with total disbursement of a little over 21 billion pesos also coming from the Bayanihan funds and also from the regular funds of the Department of Labor and Employment. Next slide, please. With a gradual opening of the economy, avenues have been in place but requires more push and better coordination so that jobs, livelihood, and training opportunities reach the unemployed, new entrants, and re-entrants to the labor market. Among the platforms we made available are Trabaho, Negosyo, Kabuhayan, or TNK webpage, virtual job fair, which would still provide job seekers protection from unscrupulous recruitment activities. Ang dami pong nating naririnig na mga anomalya pagdating po sa pagre-recruit po ng mga job seekers po natin, nagsasamantala po during the pandemic season. Online career fair in partnership with various industries, presence of job boards such as our very own PhilJobNet, updated labor market information reports, use of social media, and of course, meron pa rin po tayong traditional referral and placement services of our public employment services nationwide for those who don't have access to connectivity, to internet, and gadgets. Okay, next slide, please. One of the greatest hurdles we have is how to implement our youth employability programs when mass gathering is prohibited and below 21 years old are also not allowed to go outside their homes, lalong-lalo na po noong 2020. Some programs have been scaled down and some were suspended. But in keeping with the acceleration of the fourth industrial revolution, we have digitized some of our programs so that more youth can benefit also from the program this year. We have also used the lockdown period in updating our modules and career information pamphlets used for career advocacy and employment coaching. It is really difficult to facilitate employment, which is the role of the department. Compounding the impact of the pandemic to the labor market is the fourth industrial revolution, which heightens the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, or the VUCA of the world of work. Next slide. The country's recovery strategy is highlighted in the updated Philippine Development Plan, anchored on the theme towards a healthy and resilient Philippines. First and foremost in our recovery is the PDITRV, or Protect, Detect, Isolate, Treat, Reintegrate, and Vaccinate strategy. Towards this end, we have developed and institutionalized the NERS, or the National Employment Recovery Strategy. While the health sector, or our healthcare workers, are nursing the health of the people, the NERS is nursing employment and economy. Next slide. The NERS takes cognizance of the ILO's Decent Work Framework for us to be able to stimulate the economy and employment, support enterprises, jobs and income, protect our workers in the workplace, and also we still believe and trust in the value of social dialogue to encourage innovative solutions for our recovery process. Next slide, please. Business and workers are at the core of our operational framework in the NERS, aimed at restarting economic activities, restoring business confidence, upgrading and retooling the workforce, and facilitating the labor market access in an enabling environment supported by good governance and infrastructure. The DTI and DOLE believe that kaakibat po ng paglago ng negosyo ang paglikha ng disenteng trabaho. Next slide. On Labor Day this year, May 1, during the Job Summit jointly conducted with the Task Group on Economic Recovery, the NERS Task Force unveiled its 8-point employment recovery agenda. Among its action points is the promotion of retooling and reskilling of the workers. So makikita niyo po kanina doon sa 4 na quadrants ng NERS Operational Framework na meron po tayong 2 quadrants doon intended for our workers. The NERS Task Force agencies implement various programs and services that creates training and upskilling opportunities for Filipino workers to empower the country's workforce and improve labor market outcomes. The task force aims to establish a mechanism to harmonize employment, livelihood, and training programs and projects, enabling cross-referencing among its members to sustain support to our labor force. The NERS policies, programs, and projects are geared towards ensuring an environment in the recovery process where businesses will thrive and no Filipino worker is left behind. Next slide, please. Recently, meron po kaming nilagdaan na commitment with the Employers Confederation of the Philippines. Ito po yung tinatawag po natin na Reform, Rebound, Recover. 1 million jobs for 2021. The 1 million jobs, may I emphasize, is additional po from the current that the economy is generating. So the job sources po natin ay construction, manufacturing, particularly electronics and semiconductors, tourism, and IT BPM. Yung pong ating private sector, they are committed to generate employment even as we recover from this pandemic po. But meron po silang mga tinatawag nating hurdles dito po sa tinatawag nating paglikha ng trabaho. At syempre, unang-una na po dyan yung ating ECQ. But more than the ECQ po, nanghihingi rin po sila sa pamahalaan na matulungan po sila sa pagbabakuna ng ating mga manggagawa. And hence, tayo po ay napaunlakan ng National Task Force Against COVID-19 na hingi po ng 452,000 vaccines para po sa ating manufacturing and construction sectors. You would note that construction and manufacturing sectors are key contributors po doon sa 11.8% GDP natin ng second quarter. But mind you, merong balita ngayon, medyo slow down na naman po ulit ang ating manufacturing sector because of the recent ECQ that we had in August. But in the meantime po, ito pong pagbabakuna para sa atin pong mga key employment generating sectors or KEGs na tinatawag po natin ay magsisimula po ngayong buwan ng Setyembre at tayo po ay nakikipag-coordinate na po sa mga LGUs para masimulan po yung mga pagbabakuna po sa ating mga manggagawa. Okay, next slide please. Moving forward, the dollar remains focused on safely reopening the economy and sustaining the continuous improvement of our labor market. We put a premium on occupational safety and health in the workplace, which is paramount to the DOLE's mandate. We reiterate our call to all workers and businesses to continue the strict implementation of the minimum public health standards. Let us continue to be vigilant and avoid complacency by adhering the basic minimum public health standards. Proper wearing of mask and face shields, washing of hands, and social distancing. Paulit-ulit po ito at uulit-ulitin po natin. With the continuous rollout of the vaccination program, we anticipate less humps and bumps on the road to recovery. We urge all workers and priority groups to get vaccinated and help minimize social and economic disruptions caused by COVID-19. Next slide. For us to be able to thrive in the new normal, it requires evolving and adapting to the fast transforming world of work. We encourage job seekers and workers to take advantage of this opportunity to upskill and reskill and prepare yourselves when our economy bounces back. DOLE's programs and services, as well as those of other Nurse Task Force member agencies, will be at your disposal during these challenging times. Maraming salamat po.
At maraming salamat din po, ASEC Dominique. Tutay, we are very pleased to hear about the programs of the Department of Labor and Employment to assist our workers during this difficult times. Okay, our last panelist will give us an idea of what private companies are doing to protect their employees' welfare during this pandemic and ensure a robust and healthy workforce at all times. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Arsenio Sabado, Chief Human Resources Officer of Jollibee Foods Corporation. As a human resource executive for over 30 years, Mr. Sabado has extensive experience implementing talent management programs, managing multicultural and diverse teams across Asia, Europe, and the Americas, and leveraging human capital for competitive advantage. Under his leadership, the Jollibee Group was honored as one of the world's best employers by Forbes. In 2020, Gallup awarded the Jollibee Group with the Exceptional Workplace Award, making it the first Philippine-based company to receive the said distinction. Mr. Sabado has a degree in industrial engineering from the University of the Philippines, and he also attended Cornell University's Human Resource Development Program. Mr. Sabado, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Sheila, and a warm welcome. Maybe we can put up the slide, please. Okay, so Dr. Aniceto Orbeta Jr., distinguished panelists, officials from DFA, DTI, BIR, the Senate, House of Representatives, and other government agencies, and all our guests here today. Ladies and gentlemen, a jolly day to all of you. It is our delight to be here as the Philippine Institute of Development Studies together with other government agencies, kicks off the celebration of the 2021 Development Policy Research Month with the theme Reset and Rebuild for a Better Philippines in the Post-Pandemic World. So next slide. So before I begin, I'd like to share a little bit about who we are. Over 40 years ago, the Jollibee Group started as 2 small ice cream parlors in Metro Manila in the Philippines. Since our humble beginnings, we've since grown from 1 brand in 1 country to 16 brands in 33 countries with over 5,800 stores, becoming one of the fastest growing Asian food service companies in the world. We have become a global company based in the Philippines, competing with the best of the world. The theme, Reset and Rebuild for a Better Philippines in the Post-Pandemic, is especially relevant for us because, like many businesses, especially restaurants, the Jollibee Group has faced unprecedented challenges during the pandemic. However, we realize that for us to overcome, it is our organization and our people that will be the pillar and our source of inspiration and strength. Next slide, please. Our founder, Tony Tan Caktiong, has always believed that people should be at the heart of our business. And this fundamental principle guided us through the leadership decisions we made last year, and even now, keeping our business afloat while ensuring the safety and well-being of our employees around the world. At JFC, we firmly believe that a jolly, healthy, and robust workforce is key to sustain productivity, helping us not only recover, but become an even stronger organization in the new normal. So first, let me talk about our initiatives towards building a jolly, engaged, and motivated workforce. When the lockdowns were implemented, we immediately focused on 2 things. The first is on the most fundamental concern of our employees, their source of livelihood and personal well-being. At that time of great uncertainty, I remember, our employees, especially in the Philippines, needed assurance that we would assist them with their needs. As such, the Jollibee Group immediately worked to allocate Philippine peso 1 billion emergency response fund to provide full salaries and allowances during the lockdowns that ensued. We also advanced the 13-month pay to April so they could use this ahead of time. We also provided special premium pay and additional meals to store-based employees during ECQ and MECQ in recognition of their difficulties to be in our stores during this time. We also implemented a work-from-home arrangement for employees holding functions that can be performed remotely. We also allowed team split arrangements for some functions that need to work regularly on-site so that team members can alternately work from home. Next slide, please. We tried our best to create stability, provide security, and instill confidence among our employees through more frequent and timely communication across all levels. One such initiative was the CEO Communications, which gave an update on how we are responding to COVID, the business status, and appreciation for the efforts of individuals and teams. Another initiative was the launch of the Hive, our employee communication intranet portal, which provided employees with a channel for COVID-19 related information and companies' response efforts. The Hive also provided a platform for our employees worldwide to build a stronger sense of community as one JFC. In December 2020, we had a year-end CEO address for our leadership teams globally to provide updates on the state of the business and our recovery plans. This was followed through this year with the CEO Hour, which allowed other team members and leaders in our company to have an hour with our CEO on business updates and roundtable question and answers. I think we have covered close to 1,000 employees just around middle of this year. Virtual town halls were also held so that managers and HR can regularly check with their team members. We also launched daily health checks and weekly pulse checks to monitor the status of our employees regularly, gauge their general sentiment, and identify ways where we could help. Next, please. Second, we focus on the health and safety of our employees, which was priority for all of us. We recognize that to delight our customers and keep them safe, we must first start with ensuring that our own teams are safe and their holistic health is taken care of. As such, the Jollibee Group launched a vaccination program, which we call Jab for Joy, which provides free vaccines to all our employees in the Philippines, which we commenced in July of this year. This also allowed our business partners and employee dependents to avail of vaccines at cost. For those who needed to work on site, our biggest focus was on ensuring their safety. We provide PPEs, shuttle services, strict safety protocols on site, such as disinfection of their footwear, temperature check throughout the day, regular hand washing, social distancing, and wearing of face masks and face shields. We also provided a regular supply of vitamin C to all frontline staff. We also enhanced their medical coverage. Employees and qualified dependents from NCR and selected areas of Rizal who are confirmed to have COVID-19 can avail themselves of the remote care program. JFC has partnered with a reputable medical institution to ensure that affected employees are closely monitored, attended to, and guided back to recovery through a physician-supervised continuity of care at home. Recognizing the pandemic's toll on our mental and emotional well-being, we launched Mental Health Hotline to provide employees with free counseling and launched online wellness programs. Lastly, with the change in the work arrangements, we also saw the need to keep our employees robust by continuously equipping our managers with the necessary skills to manage remote teams effectively. We continued with our rollout of One JFC coaching program and offered virtual instructor-led leadership training. One such activity under this program was the JFC Leadership Series, where we gathered our top leaders together in engaging discussions about our challenges, about the future, and the ways to address this as a team. Aside from the learnings, it was also an excellent opportunity to come together as one global organization and realize that we are not alone in this fight. Lastly, we shifted many of our classroom-based training to online training, effectively continuing the reskilling efforts despite the limitations of the pandemic. All these initiatives and many others that I wasn't able to mention put our people in the center of what we do at the Jollibee Food Group. For us, we really strive to have an organization that is both productive and happy, true to the Jollibee name. As our founder said, what's the point if you're working hard but you're not happy? And I'm happy to say that we are seeing results as we see the company recovering. Just as how our people have driven our success in the past 40 years, their determination, hard work, and joyful attitude turned around our business from a loss in the first quarters of 2020 to a profit starting in the last quarter of 2020 and continuing so far in 2021. And despite the challenges of this pandemic, we are humbled at Jollibee Group that we were one of the only three Philippine-based companies recognized at the 2020 Forbes list of the world's best employers. We were also first and only Philippine company to be recognized with the Gallup organization's Exceptional Workplace Award. These awards affirm our commitment to being a best-in-class workplace that values and takes good care of our people, especially during these difficult times. Nevertheless, we know that we are not out of the woods yet. There are still many things to do, many challenges and uncertainties in the months ahead. However, the fundamental truth is this: we must continue doing our best to put our people first. And this will be the key to our success in this new normal and the vital enabler of our vision to become one of the top 5 restaurant companies in the world. So with that, I would like to end here. Thank you very much, and a jolly good day to everyone.
And a jolly good day to you, sir. Mr. Nakaka-happy, sir, yung nasa likod nyo, ang ating B, si Jollibee.
This one.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you very much, sir. We are pleased to know about the initiatives of Jollibee Foods Corporation to protect its employees during this pandemic. So, friends, we hope that the presentations that you heard a while ago have given you a better understanding of the DPRM theme and how and the interrelatedness of the different sub-themes, no? Kasi magkakaugnay sila kung inyong napansin. Okay, so at this point, we will now go to our open forum to accommodate the questions from our viewers, no? So at this point, may I invite our panelists to turn on your videos, if it is possible, if your internet connection will permit it. Otherwise, okay lang po. So we have a number of questions from our chat box. Okay, and let me start with a question on the presentation by Sec. So Attorney Rachel, no? So there is a question here from from Mr. Cornelio Guantero of the University of San Carlos School of Law and Governance, because you mentioned to us, you explained to us about the sustainability reporting, and you emphasized that you're practicing voluntary compliance with mandatory disclosure. He's interested to know how SEC identifies and checks the reports to make sure that there is no greenwashing when it comes to the ESG sustainability reporting, and if the SEC imposes sanctions on greenwashing. Attorney Rachel, may we hear your thoughts on this, ma'am?
Okay. So thank you, Director Sheila, on the question. And I think the question is whether, I think the first question is how do we check whether the disclosures are actually correct, or at least there's no accurate, or there's no misrepresentation.
You're right.
Yeah. So to answer your question, so the role of the SEC for the sustainability reporting is basically this is actually market driven. So we wanted that companies would fully disclose whether we provide the principles that they have to, or recommendations provided in the code of CG code for the publicly listed companies, and they have to provide whether they comply, or if they cannot comply, they provide the information why they cannot comply, or if they are actually practicing some business operations that are in fact that suits their operations, and if this is more apt, or they're actually doing something better, because we wanted it to be principle based and not just a ticking of the box. As of the question whether we're able to check each and every disclosure, we do try to check. We cannot actually validate whether it's actually correct, especially during now that we cannot do site visits and to conduct audit or on the reporting. There are actually some challenges, but actually these reports are publicly available. Any stakeholder, any interested party have access to these reports, and they can actually have better information if they do have information, if there is greenwashing. So if there is greenwashing, the company is not being truthful when they do disclose, of course, this will be investigated by the SEC, and there are penalties that can be imposed. Especially, we provide penalties for our corporate governance for the code, and there's also a penalty if I think the greenwashing that would have some impact on the sustainability reporting.
Yes.
So for that, of course, there's a misrepresentation. And we actually use the Securities Regulation Code for this as our basis for any penalties and violations. We provide that. Of course, if you also do not provide any information, you do not attach your sustainability report, this also entails penalties.
Attorney Rachel, you mentioned that the sustainability reports are available publicly. So by publicly, you mean these can be accessed from your website?
Actually, these are available in the company's website.
In the company's
Yeah,
the SEC's website.
Not the SEC's website, but the companies, but the publicly
okay,
listed
the respective company's website. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, and also it's also available in the PSE Edge, or the Philippine Stock Exchange Edge. They have their own portal. That is also the website that we go to when we do monitor these companies. So it's available in the PSE Edge, and it's we monitor the company's website as well, whether they have fully provided the disclosures that are necessary for interested parties.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Rachel. I have a personal follow-up question. How receptive are the companies that you are monitoring? How receptive are they to the sustainability principles that you discussed earlier? And also, how compliant are they with the code of code of corporate governance, no? And is there a sanction also to the non submission of the sustainability report?
So so to answer first your question is how receptive they are.
How receptive they are.
Of course, there is always the feeling that we're over-regulating these companies. Of course, we want them to disclose, to provide information on their operations. So your first question, I'll go first to the corporate governance or their compliance with their reporting on the integrated annual corporate governance reporting. So of course, we do require this. I think there were some challenges during the pandemic in the submission, but the SEC actually gave some leniency and flexibility for companies to actually file. The IACGR is usually filed on the 30th of May, following the close of the year. So if it's 2019, they were required to file on May 30 of 2020. However, for the SEC, we allowed them to
lost the connection of Attorney Rachel. Yes, Attorney Rachel, can you repeat that because we lost you for a while?
Yeah, I think there was some internet problem. So sorry. I think I was mentioning that for the IACGR, or the Integrated Annual Corporate Governance Report, these are actually filed the following year. So if it's a 29 covering period, the companies are required to file their IACGR on May 30th of the following year, which is on the 2020. However, last year we had that pandemic. We were all grappling on what to do, and we were considerate also of the companies on providing them some more time or extensions in filing their report. So we actually extended it to until June 30 for them to file it. Fortunately, this report has been required since 2017. They have been filing it, and we have been monitoring them and imposing penalties for those that are not compliant. Of course, if they continue not to comply, it's possible that not only are they going to be penalized by a fine, eventually, if they continuously not comply with it, it's possible that they may be suspended or revoked. This is very troublesome for companies because they don't want that reputation that they are not complying with the regulations. As for the sustainability, I think it's good that you asked that question, because for the sustainability reporting, I think I shared this to you when we had that discussion. Initially, we had some worries as a regulator from SEC, because we are always hounded by the idea that when we do release new regulations, that of course it's deemed as an over-regulation. There is an impression that we're burdening companies with additional tasks when this should not be so. But fortunately for us, when we actually introduced the sustainability reporting in its draft stages, I think we started it as early as 2017, there were a lot of stakeholder engagement, but in 2018, we had actually two public exposure of the regulation. And we were expecting that companies, or especially the publicly, it only covers the publicly listed companies because of the large or huge impact to the economy. We were expecting some pushback, and we were expecting that they would not want to do a reporting on their sustainability. But fortunately for the SEC, when we did the two public exposure, there were just some comments on the possible expenses that it may entail in providing the report. Of course, there are some issues that they have to have a dedicated team to do this for them. But all in all, I think they were open with this reporting, because if you see the ASEAN only, if you look at our neighboring ASEAN countries, they were already with the sustainability reports. So how can we be competitive even in the ASEAN region if we ourselves do not have it? The global scene or the bigger markets have this already for more than a decade. But for the Philippines, we were just having it in 2019. But for the ASEAN, there were. So there you go. I think they're open. I think there is a need, and because investors are actually looking at it.
That's very good news, Attorney Rachel. We'll get back to you. We have some questions here, other questions for our other panelists, and this one is for you. He specifically mentioned you, Adora, Dr. Navarro. This one is from Dan Agustin. I think he was encouraged, motivated by the scenarios that you mentioned. Remember the scenarios that you discussed, and he was asking about how can we have a proactive scenario where surveillance mechanism can be set up, or where a pandemic is known in advance by noting the symptoms that arise. And also he also mentioned like continuous study on vaccines and the mutations of viruses, etc. And I think you mentioned this in your presentation because you emphasize the need to set the right policies to enhance the country's epidemiologic capacity. Adora.
Yes, actually, the Philippines has a lot of catching up to do when it comes to updating our knowledge on vaccine development and even intellectual property rights to vaccine manufacturing, the scientific developments on treatment, prevention, how to make this more affordable. So that's where we should focus on. If there are interested researchers, that's where we should participate. And the government, the policymakers should also follow the debate on democratization of access to this to scientific breakthroughs, so that we can participate, and we can say if there comes a time when intellectual property rights to treatment, prevention, technologies, and that also to vaccine manufacturing are suspended, because there's this what's called push for time limited suspension of monopoly rights to these innovations, to the inventions. And if we are able to successfully participate here, then we will benefit from it. So that's part of the pathway that we should look at. Now, let me also relate that to the green recovery. The important green recovery topic that we are pushing for. So
I'm also one of your advocacies, Adora.
Yeah,
green and blue recovery.
Because the epidemiological path of the virus and our response to it will be related to green recovery. So we should tie up the conditions for stimulus packages that are being asked of the government, to the ESG metrics to the stakeholder capitalism principles, to green and inclusive recovery principles, like ensuring that that the correct jobs are created and created in a meaningful way in the green and blue economy growth areas. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Adora. We have questions also for ASEC Tutay, and let me start with this question from Mr. Vicente Camilon. Although I think this has already been covered in your presentation, he's asking about how can company workers be productive given the national and local mobility restrictions. ASEC Tutay has Alexander ASEC Tutay mentioned about the national recovery strategy, and I think she also covered in her presentation. She underscored vaccinating our key employment generating sectors. ASEC, would you have any additional information which you may want to add regarding this question, ma'am?
Yeah, mobility is really one of the challenges of our workers and also our employers. And that's also one of the things in the wish list that they requested assistance from the national government in our 1 million jobs project. So what we do is we coordinate closely with DOTR and also the ILG in many fora that we have met with the ILG, because different LGUs would have different, protocols in terms of the mobility of our workers, which is really a challenge. So the DILG just yesterday in our Nurse Task Force TWG meeting have committed to get us back to us on helping our workers, and not just workers, but also job seekers, because job seekers also find it difficult to look for jobs when they cannot transport themselves from one LGU to another.
Thank you very much.
We're addressing that issue on mobility with the concerned national government agencies as well.
Maraming salamat, ASEC Tutay. Okay, before we entertain the other questions, I just would like to inform all of you that we won't have a poll today. Nevertheless, we will draw 3 names who will each receive a PIDS notebook as a token of our appreciation, and we will I will announce the names of the winners before we end our webinar. Okay, we have other interesting questions, and this one, if I may throw this to you, Mr. Sabado, and this is from Alexander Micanano, and may we know, his question pertains to the corporate social responsibility initiatives of private companies, and he's asking if the CSR of a private companies, for instance, the CSR of Jollibee has been affected by the pandemic, and to what extent, and how are companies balancing the health and safety of its workers and engaging CSR. I think that second question has already been discussed by you during your presentation, but perhaps you can tell us your response to the first question in terms of the effect of the pandemic on your CSR initiatives, sir.
Yes, so thanks for the question. I wanted to link actually the first, which is about the employees and how we take care of them, to the second, which is CSR. Because as you know, Jollibee employs a sizable number of employees in the Philippines and other parts of the world, right? So we believe that if we take care of our employees, they themselves will impact the community, because it replicates 4 times, 5 times, depending on the size of the families that we impact. So I think that's the first point. So really taking care of your employees has a multiplier effect, not only to your employees, but also to the community at large.
The community.
I think the second part is during the height of the pandemic, I think we wrap up. I'm sure you've seen some of the news that came out. JFC helped a lot in terms of aiding communities, especially in the feeding programs at the height of the lockdowns. In fact, last year we supported we spent close to about 220 million pesos just on the feeding efforts, focusing on our frontliners and our marginal families in the communities, which are effectively affected by the ensuing lockdowns. So these are some of the CSR efforts that we do. I think the third one is really around aiding farmers. I mean, we've always worked with farmers. We have a farmer entrepreneurship program that we have in place where we try to source vegetables from them. We teach them entrepreneurship. And we even refer them to other institutions so that they can also sell their products. So it's a good sustainable solution, not only for us, because we get produce from these farmers, but also from other companies whom we can refer them to. So I think it's an ecosystem, not only for our employees, but the community, but also the supporting businesses that help us at Jollibee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sabado. May I also throw this next question to you, and this one is from Mr. Elmer Mercado. And okay, he's interested to know about how Jollibee applies the green and blue recovery program, or a green and blue recovery concept. So, okay, you've tackled about ethical business, also robust and healthy workforce. How about, sir, yung concept natin ng green and blue recovery?
I think it's really revolving also around sustainable business solutions,
Yes,
right?
sustainable
So I
business
think
solutions.
that's where we're heading. So we take a look at our whole value chain, from the sourcing of raw materials to packaging to food preparation. That full value chain, I think, is very critical. And we are always focusing on efforts that we are able to come up with sustainable long-term solution, not only for the company, but also for the communities at large. So that's always a top of mind. And the example I was giving also was the one on the Farmers Entrepreneurship Program. And we do a lot of work also related to our Jollibee Food Foundation, right? So that's one way also to support our various initiatives related to this.
Okay. Sir, when it comes to waste management, sustainable waste management practices, as we all know, there's been a surge of waste during this pandemic, given the increases of plastics and yung mga takeaways natin, take out, no? How is Jollibee dealing with this?
I mean, we're ensuring that we are compliant in where it is needed to be, right? So that's very important for us. We work with various government institutions to make sure that we can find a sustainable solution, not only from our side but also from the communities. We have to make sure that we are monitoring ourselves with systems, processes, KPIs to make sure that we know where we stand, especially on waste management, wastewater, etc. Those are the things that I think are critical to ensure that we have a sustainable solution for our businesses and the stores that we are in. So it's an ongoing process. I think that we have a number of initiatives that are already in place, but we're working also with the relevant government bodies to make sure that we can find a sustainable long-term solution that is win-win for everyone, for the company, but also for the government and the communities.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay, we have questions here, other questions related to the green and blue recovery schemes. And Dr. Perez, if I may throw these questions to you, we have one from Hannah Grace Games. And if I may read it, she said, given the very narrow time frame we have to turn things around, or at least hold at bay the dire consequences of climate change, and she was referring to the dire consequences of climate change. How realistic are the green and blue recovery schemes in terms of making a difference in the next decade?
Thank you for that question. You know that these green and blue recovery measures are many of them are what we call the win-win strategies, whether climate change happen or not. Like if you want to go to smart agriculture, you want to conserve natural resources, all of these things, and you want to improve your waste management. The only difference now is we don't want to increase more the greenhouse gas emissions. So that's where the low carbon development comes in. But as Jollibee has emphasized, industry should also consider the supply chain, not only whatever they're doing, but also where they are coming from, the materials, So it's a very good practice. The blue and green recovery can, we can, ano tawag doon, mabibridge niya yung
Bridge, yeah.
ating, yes, ang ating strategies towards a green and resilient future.
Mm-mm. Thank you very much, Dr. Perez. And there's another question for you from Elmer Mercado, because you mentioned in your presentation the LGU capacity program, and there's also this talk about briefly about the LGU resilience index. How, ma'am, is this being implemented? This was asked by Elmer Mercado, and would you have any idea about its implementation and how it is being monitored?
Yeah, thanks to former USEC Mercado. Itong index, resilience index na to is locally, or I should say, co-created or co-owned by the LGU. So we have a standard set of indicators, but the way it is formulated at in the participating LGUs, by the way, we have 7 right now. These are co-generated, that means pre-agreed with the LGUs. And these are not something that is outside of what they are doing. So for example, in the infrastructure, we refer to the building codes, and we also get the advice of the DPWH and private organization like PIC, the Civil Engineers Association, in the formulation of the indicators. So if it is about health, we have somebody from DOH, but this is not, not tracked by any government agencies directly, the indicators, but the source of those indicators are being tracked. Like in the health sector, they prepare they must have some what you call the health plans in the, which is under the DOH. So indirectly, it is being tracked. Okay, so for the prepare phase, we have baseline, and we have a set of because one index is a composite of several indicators. And if they have some kind of numbers fulfilled, the color will become, from baseline, it's red, will become yellow, and then green. So when it is green, that means the LGU is resilient in that particular area. The way it is evaluated is internal first. It is among themselves. It is a self-evaluation. Okay. And then at the end of the period, it is evaluated by an external auditor, depending on the documents that they have. So they have MOVs. There are means of verification. What they are saying are true. So indirectly, these indicators or indices are from the plans and reports that they submit also to the government. Yeah, that's the way it is being done.
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification, Dr. Perez, and to the question of a former USEC, Elmer Mercado. Okay, let's entertain some more questions. We still have a few more minutes. Okay, Attorney Rachel, let me go back to you, ma'am. We have other questions here regarding what SEC does, and this one is from Alexander McKinnon, and he's interested to know how SEC recalibrated its strategies and targets in terms of the involvement of private companies in meeting the SDGs in this time of the pandemic. I think there was one slide wherein you mentioned the SDGs, but this was in the context of the corporate governance principles, no?
Okay, so thank you for that question. So I think, as mentioned a while ago, no, we started to really focus on what are the corporate governance initiatives that we can implement in order to elevate the level of our, at least, compliance with the OECD principles, taking into account with all the, what, not only for the stakeholders, but we were actually elevating the level of the board, the management, and how they can actually, and of course, the participation of the shareholders. And this was focused in that CG blueprint. We started from there. What are the things and activities that we are expecting to do in the next 5 years? And this took us, we did a not only an internal looking into the SEC, what are the things that we need to do, but we did a lot of stakeholder engagement. Um, and we have been more open in what are the things that we need to do. That's why we also started with a complier explain regime, because no one size fit all. So we are very conscious that, of course, there are individualities in every companies and how they would approach their governance and how they can also comply with the recommendations. So there were a lot of discussions on this, and then of course we were able to provide that in a corporate governance, but not strictly all of, not all of those things were actually we were able to implement most of it. There are still some areas that we are going through that we found that there are some challenges in implementing them, but these are now part of our program. I think I will now mention it's the stewardship code. So these are actually the institutional investors that are more involved in on how the companies will be actually focusing on where they put their investments, or providing some directions, especially in terms of the ESG. So while that was part of the 5-year plan, we recalibrated. Of course, we needed to revisit some of the objectives and the programs and plans in the blueprint. Nothing is set in stone, but we are very, very much involved in, of course, in really calibrating and getting the buy-in of all the involved parties before we do provide the regulations for this. So far, we have done we have done a lot of the codes. We are also what we did is we started with the PLCs, and then we now have our own code for the other issuers, like the registered issuers and public companies that are not listed. So we also cover them. And then we have like another, we have another 5-year plan for this. And then eventually we will looking into the small, medium enterprises as part of the companies that we will be providing the code on, and eventually some sustainability, because one of the projects for the SEC is actually to require all companies to make a disclosure on their sustainability practices.
Thank you very much, Attorney Rachel. We are down to our last 2 questions, and this one is from Ryan Oliver and perhaps Adora. Aside from Dr. Rosa giving her insights to this question, perhaps you can also share. I think you're also familiar with this, with the People Survival Fund. So Ryan Oliver says that we have this huge amount for the People Survival Fund. However, when it comes to its use, it's not really it's not tapped very well at the LGU level, due to the tedious requirements that are being imposed to local government agencies. Dr. Rosa, would you have anything to say about, because you have been implementing this LGU capacity program, does it include the use of the People Survival Fund, and how local governments can make better use of this resources that of this fund that is really for them?
Yes, we have mentioned People Survival Fund in the workshops, in the mentoring that we're doing. but and that we are aware of the issue of TJU's requirements.
Opo.
I'm not sure about the documentation, but from the climate change point of view, the only requirement is to establish the intent or the context of vulnerability of the project. So I'm not really part of the of those from the CCC in
It's
the
okay, ma'am.
panel who look deeply into this PSF, but I understand that the difficulty is in the proposal itself.
Proposal itself.
How do they establish the context of vulnerability to
Okay.
climate change? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Perez. Adora, would you have anything to say? Yes, I
Yeah,
think you're familiar with this topic.
Yeah.
Yes.
This issue came about in meetings of the cabinet cluster on climate change mitigation and adaptation and disaster resilience. And yes, at the start, it was a mess, the People Survival Fund, but the Climate Change Commission, which is the agency tasked to implement, tasked to roll out this fund, what I know is they're on a catch-up mode. They have reduced what Ryan Oliver said, bureaucratic red tape. They have they have been receiving applications from government units, and let's hope that the catch-up mode is bearing fruit right now. I don't have updates, very recent updates, except aside from that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adora. And if I may throw this last question to Mr. Sabado, sir, we have a concern here, a question actually from Andrew Cesarimando, and it concerns how private companies, particularly those in the food business, how they promote healthy eating. You may wonder, which is part of the still the concept of ethical business promoting healthy lifestyles. Would you have anything to say, sir, regarding this
It's
issue?
Thank you for the question, Sheila. It's always a very tough question whenever
Yes, it is.
we're asked of that. But
That's
one
why
thing's
I was
for
also
sure,
trying to find the right words to say.
I think one thing's for sure, we at Jollibee, we firmly believe that diet is really a personal choice, right? It's always been a personal choice, and we respect that. What we do at Jollibee is really to offer varying options, from the different brands that we have. So I don't know if you know our brands. We have, from QSR, the Jollibees of this world. We have chicken, and we've also recently went into Chinese concept with Tim Ho Wan, etc. So our options are very varied. What is good is that I think we cater to the different customers that we have, and really trust that they make the right choices in terms of their own personal dietary preferences. Lastly, I think we, as I've said, it's very important that that we are attuned with the customers. We understand what they need, and cater our food offerings, our menu offerings, to cater to those needs of our customers. I think if there's one thing that we realized from the pandemic, it's really being attuned with the needs of our customers. Very recently, we launched for Burger King. We have the veggie burger, and I hope you guys have tasted it. It's also a very interesting offering. So yeah,
Nagugutom kami, sir, sa mga sinasabi mo.
eyes on the customer, I think, has helped us go through the pandemic, and hopefully remain attuned with what our customers need.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. In as much as we would like to entertain more questions, unfortunately, wala na po tayong oras. But just to close this open forum, may I ask our panelists for their final remarks, if they have any. Let me start with, Attorney Rachel, would you like to start?
Okay, so from the SEC, we can assure everyone that we are still working hard on elevating our corporate governance practices, and especially now a strong call on sustainability because of a lot of concerns that were brought about not only by the pandemic, but of course we have some concerns also on how do we deal with the climate change. We have been discussing a lot with not only with the local and local regulators, but we are going across seas, boundaries. We are discussing these matters also with with the Capital Markets Forum of the we are part of the ASEAN. And of course, we are also very much involved in some discussions on developments in the OECD and the international space through the World Bank and the IFC. And of course, the ADB. So we get a lot of support, and we encourage, of course, I think there was a question in the chat box on trainings. The SEC has been giving a lot of workshops for this one. Yearly, we provide it because I know that there is some call on how they can better provide disclosures. I think on the governance, because we have the IACGR and we have a template for that. But in terms of the sustainability, there are several frameworks out there. And I think this also sometimes it leads to some confusion to some companies. So it's which framework will they use? We have the Global Reporting Initiative, and now we have the VRF. This is when the SASB and of course the IRR were now joined together. And of course there are other reporting and frameworks out there. And I think we just need to have a common information that we can provide. In fact, our circular, we provided a template for those who are just starting. We provide a lot of workshops. We do this every year. We know there's a need to capacitate our reporters on sustainability, and of course, in order to avoid yung greenwashing. And yon, I think I can also, this is my chance then, we have a CG forum. We do this also every year.
Okay.
And we provide a lot of we provide trainings in that forum as well as part of our discussion on how to push forward positive and good initiatives about corporate governance and sustainability. So that's from the SEC, and thank you again for inviting us.
Maraming salamat din sa iyo, Attorney Rachel. And if I may give the floor to you, Dr. Rosa Perez, ma'am, any final messages? Any final message to our audience?
Nung nagkaroon tayo ng COVID lockdowns, tuwan-tuwa tayo because the air pollution has gone down. But this is no climate action. I would tell you that the way we reduce emission should not be through this kind of like ipinapasa mo sa ibang hazard yung solution. So we must do some concerted effort to do the real climate action, which is green and blue economy that is low carbon development and also climate and disaster resilience. So whatever the future is, it depends on the choices that we made today. So thank you. Yun lang.
Oh, very well said, Dr. Perez. And ASIC Dominique Tutay, if I may give the floor to you for your final message. Actually, there are additional questions for you from the chat box, and perhaps you may cover this in your final message, because Director Dan Agustin is asking about your thoughts about the sustainability reporting and the code of corporate governance. How does what's your view on this? What's the view of Dolly on this? I think this very much aligns with your decent work principles.
Yeah, siguro yung Thanks, Ms. Sheila. Yung closing ko nga would be responses to some of the questions in the chat box. Number one, on the unemployment insurance. Yes, it's very much needed. While we have it in Section 15 of the new SSS law, the unemployment benefits, it's not that much help to our people who have gone unemployed because of the pandemic. Where the unemployment insurance is within the updated Philippine Development Plan as a priority. Secondly, on the stakeholders' good governance of the SEC, tama kami, Sheila, it's very much linked into the social dialogue pillar of the decent work. And we do really encourage the participation, particularly of our workers or our labor force. Third, on the green and blue economy as it relates to employment, you know, the Department of Labor and Employment is producing labor market information reports. And in 2010, that has already been identified as one of the potential key employment generating sectors. In fact, we are producing some career information pamphlets that's related to green and blue economy. But we have to keep in mind that it's not that too sexy as a topic and not too attractive. So we have to better understand the green and blue economy for it to be able to attract and probably the discipline also of our country's labor force. Third, lastly, on telecommuting, yes, the Department of Labor and Employment through the Institute for Labor Studies has done a rapid assessment of the telecommuting prior to the pandemic and during the pandemic. And we have to realize that not all sectors, not all tasks, not all roles can be telecommuted. There are other types of flexible or alternative working arrangement. What we have discovered so far when it comes to a work from home arrangement is the mental anguish of our workers. And therefore, mental health has been a real issue during this time of pandemic that we need to address also. On the part of the employers in a telecommuting setup or on a work from home setup, it added much to their cost because they have to provide gadgets and connectivity, so on and so forth. So it's both a win and lose situation. But I think in an environment where we talk of fourth industrial revolution at dadating na yung 5.0 na ano, hindi pa nga tayo nakakalampas sa fourth IR, andito na ang 5.0. There's no way to go but you really to be adept with technology and be productive. So yun lang po. Maraming salamat.
At maraming salamat din po sa inyong asset, Tutay. Mr. Archie Sabado, any final words, sir,
Yes,
to our audience?
Yes, first of all, thank you for the invitation today. For PIDS, congratulations for organizing this, but also for starting off the this year's virtual workshops. I think this is really good. We really enjoyed it. The second one is really, if I were to leave one message, I think what the pandemic has taught us is that it's going to be very different in the future, and it's also going to be a future of collaboration. So, unlike what the pandemic is trying to force us, which is to separate us and isolate, right? I think we should fight it and really focus on how we can collaborate moving forward and transcend these challenges. And the key part of that is really our people, our employees, our family, our community, our friends. So a sustainable solution, we've all talked about that, really means creating a sustainable people agenda as well. So that's very critical. So thank you again, everyone, and thank you for the questions and the opportunity to share what we do at Jollibee Food Group. Thank you.
Maraming salamat din po. We are glad that a representative from the private sector, Jollibee, is with us to share their to share its thoughts on this very important topic. Okay, of course, last but not the least, Dr. Adora Navarro, would you have anything to say to our audience? And perhaps you may also want to share your response to Dr. Mary Rosales' question, and your thoughts on one of the questions that we also received through our chat box on how the concept of stakeholder capitalism could alleviate poverty in the Philippines, because you and your colleagues, the team, the APPC team, look at this rebuild and reset agenda in a comprehensive manner.
Okay, thank you everyone for attending this virtual kickoff of PIDS, and that goes to show the importance you are giving to research sa pananaliksik. No, it's not that COVID-19 and capitalism reset, green recovery, robust workforce as important implications are becoming activists or advocates theater. Hindi lang ganon. It's just that pushing these ideas is really for more inclusive recovery. So aside from reducing yung carbon footprint of big businesses, they also need to look after the interests of, say, the MSMEs and in their supply chain, and also their workers. Yung MSMEs, they play a large role in poverty alleviation and inequality reduction. So both big businesses and the government should ensure their representation in the discussions on recovery stimulus and rescue packages. So here I'm reminded of the modern proverb, if you're not at the table, then you're probably on the menu, which means that when one group, in this case, the MSME sector and workers sector, is not represented at the negotiating table, then metaphorically, their rights will likely be consumed by the others who are at the table. So yung jobs creation potential of what we're pushing for is also big. There was a study in 2017 that finds that on average, 2.65 full-time equivalent jobs are created from $1 million spending on fossil fuels. But if you will spend that same amount, in say renewable energy, energy efficiency, what the number of jobs will you create? 7.72 full-time equivalent jobs. So that's 2.65 jobs versus 7.72 jobs. So the implications are clear. Now, both big businesses and MSMEs can do that, generate jobs in green recovery growth areas and using the ESG metrics in stakeholder capitalism, and thereby help reduce poverty. Salamat po sa pag-attend.
Very good. Thank you very much, Adora. Marami pong salamat sa inyong lahat. And so at this point, please join me in thanking our panelists. For Dr. Adora Navarro, Attorney Rachel Remalante, Dr. Rosa Perez, ASEC Dominique Tutay, and Mr. Arsenio Sabado for the knowledge and insights that they have shared with us this morning. Let us give all of them a big virtual clap. And thanks to all of you, our participants, for your thought-provoking questions and comments. Friends, we hope that our conversation this morning has helped everyone appreciate and understand our DPRM theme for this year, which, as we have explained, it advocates for balancing the interests of profit, planet, and people, or placing equal importance on economic, social, and environmental well-being and sustainability. This forum, however, is just a prelude to the more in-depth discussion on the DPRM theme that we will have in the coming weeks through our annual Public Policy Conference webinar series. And to tell us more about that event and to formally close our kickoff forum is the Vice President of PIDS and head of our annual Public Policy Conference Committee, Dr. Marife Ballesteros. Peng, the floor is now yours.
Yeah, thank you, Sheila. Am I coming in? Right?
Yes, very well.
Clear?
Yes.
Yeah, this has been I would say, a very productive session and a good start for the celebration of this year's Development Policy Research Month. And I would like to extend our special thanks to our resource persons for collaborating with us and for sharing your experiences and knowledge. We also thank the media and those who have joined this event for those insightful comments. So globally, we are actually looking for that light at the end of the tunnel. And I would say we have a lot more questions than answers on what the future of post-pandemic is. But what today's discussion has impressed on us is that we need not to wait. We have taken, in fact, action on this. And we have heard from our speakers the efforts and the actions that have been put in place to adapt upon post-pandemic scenario. For the business sector, the call for stakeholder capitalism is on track, even for the Philippines, as mentioned by the SEC through its several programs. For the environment, the National Resilience Council has developed strategic partnership program with the LGUs. And I think a very important contribution is the transdisciplinary action research, meaning bringing together the academe, research, and extension to ensure that we have science-based solutions and policies. And for the workforce, both DOLE and we're glad the corporate sector have been proactive to ensure that the adverse impact on employment is reduced. And among the key programs mentioned is the adoption of the minimum health protocols at the workplace, assistance to the disadvantaged workers, and programs, which has repeatedly been said, for retooling and upscaling of the workforce. And we commend Jollibee for that for a very good and comprehensive package for your workforce, and in fact very important, not only the monetary support but also yung communication, especially in this era of disinformation and fake news. Magandang to engage your workforce at different levels in terms of what is available and what is probably what we expect for the future. So I think we also know that this entire thing is not only the business. It's not only the government and businesses that should act, but also the citizens have to take responsibility as well. So it's essentially a whole of society approach. It's a very collaborative approach that would involve all stakeholders. So we will, as mentioned by Sheila, we will further unpack these issues in the upcoming annual public policy conference, which will be delivered through 4 webinars. And I would like to share on the screen the webinar events. So the first one will be on September 14, which will include also the opening ceremony for the conference. And this will be a discussion on the global movement to upgrade or reset capitalism. The webinar will set the framework actually for the topics in the succeeding webinars. So that will be happening on September 14. Then the next will be September 16, next webinar. On September 16, the topic is on ethical business, and this will focus on the experiences and challenges of corporations to implement ethical business. For webinar 3, which will be held on September 21, the topic will be on green and inclusive recovery, and this will discuss the areas for which government and the private sector, especially businesses, can work together for better environmental, social, and governance outcomes. And the 4th webinar, which will be held on September 24, is on the robust and healthy workforce. which will be a discussion of post-pandemic jobs and the key areas for social protection and workforce reforms. So we have actually invited international and local experts to enrich the sharing of experiences and insights on the different topics. For more information about this webinar and the speakers, please visit our PIDS website on the DPRM events. So again, we hope that you can join us again at the APPC webinar events and other DPRM activities. So muli, maraming salamat. Good day, everyone, and stay safe.
Thank you very much, Pen. Okay, just on some announcements before we finally say goodbye. So let me announce the winners of our draw for this webinar. As I mentioned earlier, they will each receive a PIDS notebook. So Gloria Nelson, Carlo Agovida, and Heidi Villamayor. Gloria Nelson, Carlo Agovida, Heidi Villamayor. Our webinar team will contact you for your prize. And okay, just some reminders. You can access all the presentations from the PIDS website. Okay, flash on the screen also. Flash on the screen is the link, is the URL to our seminar page. Okay, and please answer the feedback survey that will pop on your screen after this webinar, and we will also email you the link after the event. Your comments are important to us to improve our virtual events. Please also visit our website and social media pages for all our studies as well as announcements on our upcoming events. And as mentioned by Dr. Ballesteros, if you would like to have more information about our celebration for this year, our Development Policy Research Month celebration, just go to the DPRM website, dprm.pids.gov.ph. And also, we encourage you to use the following hashtags whenever you share our post on social media. Okay, and finally, we would like to thank everyone who participated in this event, representatives from the government, from the private sector, civil society, academe, as well as from the media for participating in our kickoff forum for the Development Policy Research Month. You can find their names on the screen, and we will continue to flash the slides after the end of this webinar. Okay, so again, maraming salamat po for joining us in this kickoff forum to herald the start of the DPRM. See you on September 14 for the opening program and the first installment of the annual Public Policy Conference webinar series. Enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe and healthy. Maraming salamat po at isang magandang tanghali sa ating lahat.
Congratulations!
Salamat at congratulations!
Maraming salamat po sa inyo, Dr. Perez, Asek Tutay, Mr. Sabado. Of course, Attorney Rachel, thank you po. Ingat po tayong lahat. Bye for now. See you.